cost and schedule management, really the biggest thing, as you all are aware, I'm sure, is that you're minimizing the time to complete a project, or which is in turn minimizing your project cost. But most of the time, those are kind of conflicting objectives. So some of the things that you need to do is to really develop a good set of tasks and subtasks. And whether you've been a project manager before or not, you've developed these work breakdown structures, whether you called it that or didn't call it that, so that you break it down into pretty detailed. You've got your major tasks, and you can put a schedule to those, but also the minor tasks and subtasks below that. And usually when you're doing that, you're not only assigning a budget, you're assigning specific persons or specific job titles to certain things. So your resource are really, the most part, what we're doing is not only our materials and equipment, but our human power, who we have on that project. So one of the things you really have to take into consideration in recent years, a lot of people have had layoffs or downsizing. So your human resources are often at a premium, and those things may hold up your schedule at times. So that's one of the things you not only looking at. A lot of times people are saying, all right, for this task, I'm going to need this equipment out there, I need this subcontractor out there and everything else, and looking at the equipment and the costs, but they're not saying, who's going to man the job or woman the job, whatever the case may be, but who's going to be out there running things, or who am I going to have dedicated to this? So that's really something you need to think about when you're doing your breakdown structure and assigning your tasks and your budget. Schedule, again, that's rather straightforward, a time sequence of activities based on precedents, time constraints, resource limitations. Biggest thing is that you need to make sure you allocate enough time for the reviews. I'm sure that all of the companies that you work for have specific review times where it needs to go through. I guess it also depends often on how big those companies are, but your management or whomever needs to take a look at those. But one of the things, there's a couple of different ways, and one is the program evaluation and review technique, the PERT technique. That's really, you're using kind of time estimates and equations to calculate your anticipated durations, and you always want to add in variance or worst case scenario. Another probably a method that you do, whether you've called it critical path method or not, it's really about what your predecessors are, what has to happen before something else happens, how much time it can take, but you also have to build in that slack time, whether it's this equipment may or may not get here by the week we want to start it. Is it going to lag by a week? Is the potential time in there 2 weeks? So what can we be doing in tandem with that may not have to have that task done? So really kind of saying, okay, what's our drop dead date or our time to completion date? And that may depend on saying, hey, the budget is only available up until January of 2021. And so you kind of have to work backwards and say, our critical path is this. These are the things that take the longest. And so you build in that time and look when you need to get started. Obviously, if you're working offshore, doing offshore drilling, you're going to have more lag times built in there, and times to get equipment out there, what could go wrong, whether it be weather, everything else. You have to count all of these into play. But I would say probably the most common method that we work to in this industry is probably the critical path method. So understanding what needs to proceed, what tasks need to proceed, what tasks. I think that's important to know and to think about. Another thing that everyone has probably done is a Gantt chart of sorts. This Gantt chart, basically you're fitting all of the tasks to a calendar, and it's really nice to be able to lay it out and color code. This one's got a lovely color code here, but it's to say, these are the planned activities are. Here's what my guesstimated duration is and the actual progress. And a lot of times you'll put not only tasks under there, but the people that are assigned to those tasks. And as you can see, a lot of these tasks like task 3 is overlapping a lot with task 2. Task 2 is overlapping task 1. So these are all things that can be done in tandem, but I think it's a very useful way to lay out and schedule people's time for certain projects, but also to say, this is the amount of time it's going to take. And the bar chart format is just a useful way to do a big overview. It's also a very useful thing when you're talking about needing human power and going to your management and saying, hey, this is what it's going to take to get there. If you want to get there by January of 2021, this is what I need you to dedicate as far as people and monetary resources at a time. Of course, once you start laying out your schedule, then you can start putting your budget amounts to that too.